The United Nations is marking its 75th anniversary at a time of great disruption for the world, compounded by an unprecedented global health crisis with severe economic and social impacts. How will the global body ensure that countries emerge stronger and better equipped to work together? In the program, we are privileged to have UN Resident Coordinator Maria Jose Torres. I'm Kumbukani Piri. Welcome to the program. Maria Jose Torres, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure to be with you.
Now, this year, the United Nations is commemorating 75 years of existence in the world. Can you describe the journey, the past 75 years?
It has been, I think, one of the most passionate times, most convoluted for the United Nations and for humanity. I think together we have overcome wars. We have been fighting together for human rights. We have been together trying to put a dimension to what poverty means and how we overcome poverty together. And also, and I think most importantly, we have found ways to connect humanity through common causes, whether it's human rights, climate action, or absolutely responding in solidarity to humanitarian crisis, whether it's floods or earthquakes. I think that's the value added of the United Nations. Working together with the member states and the people of the world.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you compare the state of affairs currently to the time when the United Nations was starting off in 1945?
So in 1945, the world was coming out of a big war. It's true that not all countries were affected in the same way, but I mean, since the world at that time was very Eurocentric and with the US participation, I think it felt that it was affecting everybody. Therefore, I think the most important thing that the founding leaders of the United Nations were looking at, it was peace for the world. They felt very strongly that the price to pay for a world at war was too big in terms of years of development, human lives, suffering. Therefore, they thought, okay, we need something that holds us together on the value of peace, and to realize peace, we need two other things very closely together. One is human rights, and the other one is development. There is no peace without human rights and development, which is, if you look at it, exactly the same type of struggles that we are facing today. The same values sustain the UN in 2020.
Now, if you look back the past 75 years, what would you point at as being some of the major accomplishments of the United Nations?
So, since the United Nations was created as the big global peace body, I would say that bringing about a table for dialogue and achieving peace has been one of the most notable achievements. And the world has seen peace processes being completed in a number of countries, whether in Africa, in Latin America, or in Asia. We have seen countries becoming independent thanks to the support of member states through the United Nations. We have seen countries fighting conflict thanks to the support of the peacekeeping forces that are a tool and an asset for the countries and their people who are really fighting. And in the middle of those fights, we have civilians. We have the humanitarian responses in those contexts. So people working for the United Nations who are frontline workers, whether it's health, whether it's protection of civilians, whether it's providing food, and this continues to be the case, for instance, in Yemen, in the Middle East, or when we have a big earthquake, you will see the UN coming very close to respond. But two very important things that I believe the UN has contributed to. One is the whole normative aspect of the international relations, whether it is to conflict prevention or to human rights. The UN has been that fora that has allowed countries to really come together, and sometimes countries have had different speeds. And we have, for instance, the Human Rights Council, and we have a General Assembly that has allowed to put together member states, one state, one vote, which is extremely equal. We have a Security Council that is a body that brings member states, that is the result of Second World War. And there are many countries trying to see how we reform the Security Council, including Malawi, so it's more equal to the realities of the world. And we have also the whole development system of the United Nations, working with member states to overcome poverty and fight for climate change, for instance.
Now, bringing it back home, what are some of the contributions that the United Nations has had in Malawi?
So we were together with the Malawian people when you became independent. So it is since 1964 that the United Nations has had a presence. And I have to say, very impressive was to see that your main constitution writers also enjoyed the support of the United Nations at that time. Obviously, it's your people that put a pen and thought about what type of country you wanted. But I mean, to be at the origin of democracy and independence in this country has been very uplifting. We have worked together in elections. We have been together with the Malawian people responding to major flooding or dry season events. We have been together with you working on decentralization, women's rights, and creating, for instance, greater space and education for children. So, and currently we are really working very strongly with you on climate action. The National ID project is something that very recently we have worked together, and I think this is contributions that Malawi are also providing to the rest of the global community.
Now, you did mention that the celebration of 75 comes at a time of great disruption to the world. What do you mean by this?
So certainly COVID-19 has put the world in its knees, and the disruption comes to think that if the world needs to be connected, and traveling was a big part of it. The fact that the pandemic put us in lockdowns and destroyed millions of jobs created the impression that the health systems were not as good as we thought, and that actually were not ready, even in countries that were extremely well developed, and exposed fragilities in our systems, particularly those who are most left behind. I think we need to think about the world that we want. So the invitation of the UN75 is very timely, because we cannot overcome the pandemic, and this is extremely clear, unless we cooperate together. At a time of fake news, at a time that many people have different ways of tackling the issues, it's more and more important that humanity really brings together their talent to overcome the issues of COVID-19.
Now, we have seen that you're running a UN75 dialogue campaign on various platforms as part of the UN75 commemoration. Tell us more about this campaign.
So the United Nations country team in Malawi is composed of 20 agencies, funds and programs. We came together to echo something that is happening across the planet. So many countries have had a dialogue, national dialogues about how the people of the country sees the future. And we wanted to contribute and make sure that we help opening the mics and opening the possibility for people in Malawi to contribute to this global dialogue. So we have run actually a number of activities. We have had a lot of young people contributing to the U report through their mobiles. We have had an online survey. We have teamed up with the media, yourselves, and the most important media outlets to capture also the debates. And we have run 12 different programs debating the issues that we are confronted, and really asking Malawians to project themselves forward in terms of what is the future that they see. And we are extremely encouraged by the fact that most people answering the questions see the future better. And I think that's the only way that we can move forward. We need people who have the conviction that we can change realities and transform it for a better future.
So what are you going to do with the outcome of what you get from the conversation that is going on with a UN75 dialogue?
So this is a key question, because the actual idea of a dialogue is really to really encourage people to participate, to express their voice, and really to reassure people that their opinion counts. Therefore, we are very committed to bring back to Malawians what is the result of the conversation that has to do with inequalities, climate action, participation of women, justice and human rights. And we will have a presentation and a report that is going to be submitted for consideration to the National Planning Commission as they are engaged in the visioning exercise. We will submit the result of this also to the Parliament so they can see what a section of Malawians think about the future, and also to the government of Malawi. So, and it will be publicized in our web pages.
Now, what kind of Malawi and world should be, or what do you envision in the next, say, 25 years?
So we think that the only way to envisage a future that is better than we see today is to really work very hard on empowering people and allowing them to realize their full potential and their rights. And when I say that, is really thinking about, we need to establish partnerships. The state has a very important role to play, but also the private sector. And what about the individuals? So societies that give young people opportunities, societies that look at women and their progress as something that they need to promote because it's a sign of development. Societies that look into the tensions and establish dialogue and bridges. And I think for that, I would like to say that Malawi is one of the greatest examples of a country that has systematically used dialogue and institutions as a way to address conflicts. And I think in that regard, as United Nations in Malawi, we're extremely proud, and we are trying to present this case as something that can be replicated outside, because we believe that based in the principles of the UN Charter, that we need a humanity that is at peace, that uses dialogue, and that we can cooperate together.
You're watching MBC Exclusive. Our guest this week is the UN Resident Coordinator, Maria Jose Torres. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to MBC Exclusive. Our guest this week is Maria Jose Torres, UN Resident Coordinator. Now, Maria, if the current trends continue, what kind of Malawi do you think that we'll have, say, in 2045?
So I think we are seeing positive and negative trends. So those have to be balanced. So very positive is to see a greater engagement of civil society. Media becoming one of the most vibrant media in Africa. Like, you can really start feeling that you are very open. We can see the appetite by different sectors of society of being more involved in the future of country. Excellent, excellent trend. We are also seeing trends that are extremely complex and that require urgent action. For instance, the issue of population growth. Malawi is one of the countries that are growing faster in terms of people. If nothing is done, imagine 50 million of Malawians in the same territory by 2045. I think that will be extremely, extremely difficult to handle. And the other element that we like very much to encourage everybody to take very seriously is the element of climate degradation. You know, Malawi is very sensitive to climate shocks. The way in which you are losing your trees, you are losing the biodiversity that is associated with the ecosystems is so fast that unless we do something dramatic, you are going to see Malawi losing opportunities. And the last is really about thinking Malawi as part of the global community. And I know Malawi has been a landlocked country, and what's the problem of being landlocked? It can become an opportunity. So maybe thinking on your location in Africa as being the link country, so you can really explore economic opportunities.
So how can we collectively bridge the gap between the Malawi and the world we hope for, and the Malawi and the world that may result if we don't manage the current status quo?
So I think the dialogues have been extremely inspiring, and the type of things that have been coming about recurrently in any country, again, north and south, east and west, so it is a dialogue for the humanity. First of all is the need to continue investing in people. It is so essential to take care of the human capital. So children, women, people with disabilities, a country that is not taking care of their own people is never going to develop properly. Second, the whole issue of inequalities. So eliminating poverty is possible. But what about inequality? So we are seeing countries developing, but not necessarily the gap between those who have and has not. And that has to be a deliberate effort of governments and also civil society to make sure that we are more equal. Third, climate action. I mean, it is a call, you know, every time that we are seeing images from the world, whether it's after an earthquake, the fires that we have been experiencing, the Arctic melting, this is not for that people there, it affects all of us, and we have been feeling it very strongly in Malawi as well, and requires a very consistent investment, I mean, from the community up to the decision makers. And I think what is really very important is also to think about the partnerships that are necessary. So it's not only a task for governments, although they have the trust of the voters, therefore they have to deliver, but it's also a task for all of us as individuals, as citizens of the planet, if you want to really to contribute. So we need to tap into the domestic capacities and make sure that people is engaged. That is not a foreign discussion, it belongs to all of us. Because honestly, I think we all want to see our kids having a planet that is sustainable and that can hold the future generations.
Now, peace and stability are very key when it comes to the United Nations. How do you look at it with a Malawi perspective and even the global perspective?
So exactly that's the whole point of having a UN Charter that is looking after a global commitment for peace and stability. It's not for one country, it's for all the global community. Over the years has been evolving, and I think more and more we are seeing the role of the regional organizations also to keep peace and stability very closely back home. In the case of Africa, we have the African Union, we have SADC, and you asked me what is the role of Malawi and all that. I think I would like to take the question in two ways. Mm-hmm. One, Malawi showed in the recent presidential elections in 2019-2020 that despite great concerns and protests on the streets and disagreements over what was going on and grievances expressed clearly, you systematically resorted to institutions that could help Malawi to bring an answer to those questions. And I think Malawi was commended then, and I should be commended this very achievement today, because you showed the world there are so many contested elections. Yeah, today I think we are even watching some countries that are exactly demonstrating because they don't like the result. But Malawi made a very conscious choice as a country. Your political parties, the parliament, the civil society, to do not destabilize the country and continue preserving something that I think as Malawians, you find it very dear to you and your cultural upbringing, that is peace and dialogue. So I think that's absolutely a fundamental asset that Malawi brings to the international community of nations. Now, from the perspective of peace and stability in the region, I think a couple of things as well. Malawi is a contributor to peacekeeping operations. So Malawi has been working in the context of peacekeeping in countries such as Rwanda, Somalia, DRC, Sierra Leone. You have been really there, one of the best forces. Both the Malawi military and the Malawi police have been serving, and they continue to serve. And I think you must be proud, because you were also making a contribution with your own people to that common goal. And the other point is the role of Malawi as a country and societies in the mechanisms that you have in the region. For instance, you have Malawi now very clearly becoming one of the leaders in SADC. Malawi is going to be the chair of SADC next year, taking over from Mozambique. At the global level, Malawi has just been selected as one of the members of the Human Rights Council. I am extremely happy that Malawi took that decision and it was selected, because it is a very firm commitment to one of the founding principles of the UN Charter, that is to really preserve human rights. So I think this is one of the areas that I would like to encourage Malawi and Malawians to continue harvesting, that it should be part more and more of your curriculum when the kids are growing up. It should be part more and more of not just the law university, but also, you know, when you study economics, because peace has an economic value, because the absence of peace, believe me, is extremely expensive.
Now, talking about that, do you think, as the United Nations, you would own part of this this feat that Malawi has achieved, the political feat that we're proud of today?
So I think we should be humble, because there is nothing that can be achieved without the national leadership. And I think this is a way to also acknowledge that so many Malawians, men and women, were very clear on what they wanted and how they behaved, despite pressures of all kinds. But I think being humble and recognizing the leadership of Malawians in this outcome, I am very proud to say that the UN was just very involved in creating space for civil society, working in terms of the legislative reforms that were necessary. And the way in which we do it is really very much from behind, providing you, when it's necessary and you request it, technical advice, sometimes financial support. We have been working with your national institutions on elections. And again, the way in which we work on elections, we don't do observation of elections. It's a common mistake that the UN observe elections. We don't do that. We, on the contrary, work in the case of the elections in 2019 to 2020, we work with MEC, we work with CMD, the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, with the Malawi Police Service, and we created something very special because, again, you mentioned that is key. Malawian women are not equally represented in parliament or in politics. And by the way, it's not only the problem of Malawi, it is a global issue, but here we were very engaged in trying to see how we start monitoring women's participation. So I think, and now currently we are working with all those institutions to have a very thorough lessons learned. So the UN, I think when we work well, is when we really put at the table those who can really discuss. Behind the scenes, I think the UN was also supporting those who had a capacity to lead on dialogue. And there were a lot of work done at a very high level to speak with everybody. And I think we did our tiny part there, but again, I want to acknowledge and recognize Malawians for this achievement.
Maria Jose Torres, it was lovely having you in the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's how we end this edition of MBC Exclusive. Our guest this week was the UN Resident Coordinator, Maria Jose Torres. I'm Kumbukani Piri. Thanks for watching and goodbye.